conscientious, meticulous, project-orientated, right? Yep.
All right.
What was fourth?
Project oriented.
No. Practical, that's it, right.
Got it.
Okay.
All right. Are we on?
He never does my hair.
Don't lean forward too much this way.
Okay.
You know,
Sure.
Sneak. You don't have to actually look at them. Just cheat.
Yeah. I must develop my bust. I must develop my bust.
Oh my God.
Okay. Whatever you want.
All right. This personality type is called the engineer. Can you tell us a little bit about the engineer?
Well, engineers are driven by the desire to complete projects. That's how they see life. There's a series of projects, and they have to tick off the list.
Do they see women as projects?
They don't actually think about women. No, I'm sorry. I just, you've seen The Big Bang Theory?
Yes.
Right, well, The Big Bang Theory, funnily enough, that's true, but they don't actually see the women as women, if you think about it. I mean, they don't. They don't.
They don't.
The women are there to sort of
Right.
provide some light relief, but what they're really interested in is
That project they're working on.
the technical projects they're working on, right?
Right.
And you can see the combinations. I mean, Leonard is has got some double checker in there. Kuthpali's got some artists. Sheldon's got some politician. And Howard has got a bit of hustler, right? That's the associate. But underneath, they're all engineers. They want to complete projects. They're very technical. When they're working on a project, they're very meticulous, conscientious. But another thing is they're practical. They want to touch it. You know, they often seem they're working with their hands on everything. I mean, even if they're doing something theoretical, they're working it out on a whiteboard, drawing the visual, etc. So that really sums up the engineer.
All right, so I have a kid in class. He's an engineer, but he happens to be the cutest guy in the room. So my best bet probably is to tell him about some project that I'm working on and need his help with, and let's work on it together, right?
Can you help me fix my computer? How do you load an app on an iPhone? Right? Okay. And then you look at it and see 10, no, I didn't load any of those. I got someone else to do it. You know, someone really intelligent and who basically sort of, you know, understands that the important thing in life is to do things and get it right.
I like it.
You get the idea? So that's the sort of, if you get them to do a task and if they can complete it relatively quickly, you have to let me buy you a cup of coffee, right? Let's go.
I like this. Good tactics.
So that's effectively a strategy to say, you must let me thank you. Let me buy you a cup of coffee, right? And then you can go and have a one-on-one conversation and take it from there.
What are going to be some major turnoffs that you want to avoid if you're dating an engineer?
Well, one thing is they tend to be task-orientated. So show enthusiasm for their project, but not enthusiasm for other projects, right? No, I mean, I'm so serious about that because they will tend to come back to their conversation about their project again and again. They're monomaniacs.
Yeah.
And what you got to do is go with the flow. Listen, go with the flow, and say that's really interesting. Oh, really? I never knew that. Things like this. Okay.
Right.
Whether
so show interest in whatever that project is, because that's the baby.
That's the baby they're working on at the moment.
It's the same as like if the hustler letting them talk about their money, let the engineer talk about their project.
That's right. And you're let's say if you're a female and you're talking to an engineer male, which is probably more common, etc., is the main thing is what you've got to do is subtly maneuver that their next top project is basically forming a relationship with you. No.
I like it.
That's basically the way to look at it, right?
Right.
Like that. Okay, so there we are. Okay.
So what do you think are going to be the major conflicts with this type of person? Can they become kind of standoffish since they're very project-oriented?
Well, etc. The big thing is if they're working on something, interrupting them suddenly. They're not spontaneous people in that sense. Right. So the classic thing is pre-arrange the meetings. So don't suddenly turn up at their place, knock on the door, and say, I'm here. Exactly. They don't want to do, well, etc. Say, always pre-arrange the meetings, set some time to do it, right?
Right.
Okay. The other thing is, I think, which is a good tactic, is they really like reading about what they're doing. So set a project, say something like, why don't we go for the weekend, let's say if you're living in California, let's go to San Francisco for the weekend, right? And then say, get something like a 100-page guide and say, I Skyford, I thought you might be interested in it, right? Now, they will read it.
They'll read the whole thing.
They'll read the whole thing, say, right, we're there for 3 days. There's 6 activities you want to do. They'll come back to you and say, well, here are the 6 things I think we should do. And there'll be a little list.
That is a great tactic, because I heard you talking earlier in the sales portion about always using manuals and brochures for business meetings. But you can do the same thing if they're too enthralled with their project and you want a date.
Yeah.
Put that manual in front of them for where you want to go and let them read all those details,
That's
right?
right. And they'll come up with a to-do list. And you just go there. And what you also do is you might say, well, I really don't want to go to a cemetery, right? Okay. So you say, those 2 or 3 things are great.
Off.
Okay, but say, but maybe, why don't we do this instead? And they'll be, because it's part of the planning process, they won't say, oh my God, I had my heart set on this. They'll say, oh, yeah, okay, we'll do that, okay, etc. And
Right.
you can say, did you get the idea? Something like
Yeah, getting it, and I'm assuming trying to keep, they tend to be intellectual. Is this true?
Well, they tend to be technically orientated. They really are. I mean, you think
Okay.
I think that's the big thing. I mean, they're in the latest technical innovations, etc. They're into that big time. So they got they were the first people to buy smartphones, the first people, for example, to design web pages, etc. I mean, right now, I've sort of noticed they're the people who drive Teslas, right? Okay, so that's essential. It's the latest thing, and that's another thing. I mean, for example, they made all before drive. Actually saying to them, boy, by the way, I sold this sort of article, or I sold this thing on a Tesla, etc. Well, they'll take it home and look at it.
So it's not necessarily just being intellectual with them, but being intellectual in the right areas.
That's right.
Because I would assume, like with the socializer, you could be like, take them to a party. You don't even have to have deep conversation, but they could find you fun.
Yeah.
And so you would want to have more of that intellectual conversation type of this.
Yes, they're more in depth. That's right.
Yeah.
They like going into the detail, and they wallow in it, in fact.
Right.
Okay. And as I said, the thing to do is have some crutches like books or manuals, etc., to let them do it. Right?
So would they still be willing to go out and be social, or they tend to be more themselves?
You can say to them, part of the great line is they're one of the ones always searching for balance. Okay, so you can say, well, part of the balanced life is X. The other thing is, I think they actually see things as a project. So you might say, a good idea is to pick up like a joint outdoor interest and get to it, right?
Yeah.
You might,
Let's learn how to do this together.
That's right, exactly.
Or even, let's learn how to work the party circuit together. We can figure out how social dynamics work. It's a project.
You've got to talk about it in that way. No, you're right. That's the way to do it, something like that. Or such things like, well, let's go to, I see this list of the 5 best bars in town or X.
Let's go check them out.
Look, why don't we check it? Well, each Tuesday or each Friday night, what we're going to do is each Friday night we're going to go to one of these bars for the next 5 nights, next 5 Fridays. Do you get the idea?
I think I do.
Okay, so
I think I have ideas pondering in my mind.
That's right.
So what are some of the risk groups for the engineer?
Right, engineer. Well, it's what the 2 groups they don't like is mainly because they find them superficial. I mean, right? So it's hustlers because they're always lazy and trying to cut the corners,
Right.
and socializers because they tend to do everything, start everything and finish nothing, and that's anathema to an engineer. They start one thing and they finish it, right? That's the way they look, and they find both of those groups basically too emotional. They're more task orientated, so that's basically the 2 groups they find risky. They don't get along with naturally.
So interesting. All right, so there you got it. If you are dating an engineer or you want to date an engineer, figure out some way to turn yourself into a project for them or make the date into a project, and you will have them hooked.
You got it. That's it. That actually was very good. I've never thought about it.
That.
But you like that. That's why it would work. Actually.